Sundar Pichai stepped out of the sleek black car into the cool evening air. After a 14-hour flight and 3 back-to-back meetings, exhaustion clung to him like a heavy coat. The Grand Palace Hotel stood before him, its marble entrance glowing with warm light against the darkening sky. "Good evening, sir," the doorman said with a practiced smile, taking his small carry-on bag. Sundar nodded politely in response. The lobby was a picture of luxury. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, plush red carpets stretched across marble floors, and the soft notes of a piano floated through the air. Normally, Sundar would appreciate such details, but tonight his mind was focused on a hot shower and sleep. He approached the front desk where a young woman typed quickly on her computer. Her name tag read Sarah. She looked up with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "Good evening. How may I help you?" she asked. "I have a reservation." "Pichai, Sundar Pichai," he said, sliding his identification and credit card across the marble counter. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard as she searched for his name. Her forehead wrinkled slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see a reservation under that name. Are you sure it's for tonight?" Sundar felt the first pang of irritation but kept his voice even. "Yes, I'm certain. It should be the executive suite for 3 nights. My assistant confirmed it yesterday." Sarah called over a colleague, a tall man with slicked back hair who introduced himself as Marcus, the evening manager. He looked at the computer screen and then at Sundar with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Pichai, from Google?" Marcus asked, his voice uncertain. "Yes," Sundar replied, too tired to add his exact title. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. "We have you down as arriving tomorrow, sir, and there seems to be some confusion about which room was reserved." Sundar took a deep breath. Travel mix-ups were nothing new to him. "I can show you the confirmation email if that helps," he offered, reaching for his phone. "That won't be necessary, sir," Marcus said quickly. "We can accommodate you tonight, of course. It's just that the executive suite isn't ready. We can offer you one of our deluxe rooms for tonight and move you tomorrow." Under normal circumstances, Sundar might have pressed the issue or called his assistant to sort things out. But the weight of fatigue made the decision easy. "That's fine," he said. "I just need a place to sleep." Sarah looked relieved as she processed his check-in. "Thank you for understanding, Mr. Pichai. We'll make sure everything is sorted by tomorrow." The bellhop who took his bag didn't seem to recognize him either. As they rode the elevator up to the 10th floor, Sundar noticed the young man glancing at him curiously. "Here for business?" the bellhop asked. "Yes," Sundar answered simply. The room was smaller than he was used to, but clean and comfortable. After the bellhop left, Sundar stood by the window looking out at the city lights. He sent a quick text to his assistant about the reservation mix-up before stepping into the shower. As the hot water washed away the day's stress, he had no idea that this small confusion was just the beginning. By this time tomorrow, his name would be trending on social media platforms, including the very ones his company owned. But for all the wrong reasons. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains as Sundar Pichai woke up. For a moment, he forgot where he was. The unfamiliar room slowly came into focus. He checked his phone. 5 missed calls from his assistant and several text messages about schedule changes for today's tech conference. After a quick shower, Sundar headed down to the hotel restaurant. The Grand Palace's breakfast area was famous for its lavish buffet and spectacular view of the city. As he entered, a hostess approached him with a menu. "Table for 1, sir?" she asked without a hint of recognition. "Yes, thank you," Sundar replied, following her to a small table by the window. He ordered coffee and was scrolling through emails when a tall man in a crisp suit approached his table. The man wore a hotel badge that identified him as Richard Hawkins, events manager. "Excuse me, sir," Richard said with a professional smile. "I believe you're our keynote speaker this morning?" Sundar looked up, confused. "I don't think so. I'm speaking at the Tech Innovation Summit, but that's at the convention center at 2 p.m. Richard's smile faltered. "You're not Dr. Sunil Patel from Quantum Solutions?" "No, I'm Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google." A flash of embarrassment crossed Richard's face, but it was quickly replaced by doubt. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir, we have strict security protocols for our events. May I see some identification?" The request caught Sundar off guard. People rarely asked him for ID these days. Nevertheless, he reached for his wallet only to realize he'd left it in the room safe. "I'm sorry, I don't have it with me right now," Sundar explained. "But I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not your speaker." By now, a small group of hotel staff had gathered nearby, watching the interaction. Richard's posture stiffened. "Sir, we have a very important investors' meeting about to start. If you're not Dr. Patel, why are you claiming to be the CEO of Google?" Sundar felt a flash of irritation. "I'm not claiming anything. I am the CEO of Google. This is a simple case of mistaken identity." A woman in a business suit approached. "Richard, is there a problem?" "Dr. Patel still hasn't arrived." "This gentleman says he's the CEO of Google," Richard explained, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it. The woman studied Sundar's face. "You do look somewhat familiar." "Because he's on TV and magazines," came a voice from behind. A young waiter had stopped serving to join the conversation. "That's definitely Sundar Pichai. I did a project about him in business school." Relief washed over Sundar as the waiter pulled out his phone and quickly searched for a photo. "See." The waiter showed his screen to Richard and the woman. The color drained from Richard's face. "Mr. Pichai, I am so terribly sorry for the confusion. Please accept my sincere apologies." The woman looked mortified. "Oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. Please forgive us." Sundar waved off their apologies with a good-natured smile. "It's fine. These things happen." Just as the situation seemed resolved, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the restaurant. A group of people with cameras and notebooks appeared, led by a woman with a microphone. "There he is," someone shouted, pointing at Sundar. Before he could react, the group surged toward his table. They weren't journalists as he first thought, but participants from another event at the hotel. A simulation exercise for public relations students who had mistaken him for their surprise celebrity guest. As flashes went off and questions were shouted at him, Sundar realized his quiet breakfast had just become a very public spectacle, and somewhere in that crowd, someone was live-streaming the whole confusing scene to the internet. Sundar's attempt to escape the restaurant chaos was interrupted by a hotel staff member who approached him with urgency. "Mr. Pichai, thank goodness we found you. The meeting is about to begin, and everyone is waiting." The woman, whose badge read Melissa, events coordinator, took his arm gently but firmly. "I think there's been a mistake," Sundar began, but Melissa was already guiding him through a side door and down a hallway. "No time to explain," she said, walking briskly. "They're already running 15 minutes behind schedule." Before Sundar could protest further, they arrived at a set of ornate double doors. Melissa straightened his tie and brushed invisible lint from his shoulder. "Just follow the talking points we sent yesterday." "Good luck," she whispered, pushing open the doors. Sundar found himself facing a boardroom filled with about 20 people in expensive suits. They all turned to look at him expectantly. A large screen at the front of the room displayed a logo he didn't recognize: Horizon Tech. A silver-haired man at the head of the table stood up with a broad smile. "Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Gupta." Sundar froze. Mr. Gupta? Now he understood. They had confused him with Ajay Gupta, the CEO of a rising AI startup that was rumored to be seeking a major investment deal. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," Sundar said, but his voice was drowned out by applause. The silver-haired man gestured to an empty chair. "Please, take a seat. We're eager to hear about the breakthrough your team has made in quantum computing." A woman slid a folder toward him as he reluctantly sat down. "Your presentation materials, as requested," she said with a wink. Sundar opened the folder to find detailed technical specifications for a product he knew nothing about. Looking up, he saw 20 pairs of eyes fixed on him, waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began carefully, "I need to clarify something. I'm not Ajay Gupta. I'm Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google." The room fell silent. Then someone laughed. "Good one," a man in a blue suit called out, always starting with a joke to break the ice. The silver-haired man chuckled. "Yes, very amusing. Now, about that quantum processor your team has developed." Sundar closed the folder. "I'm serious. There's been a mix-up. I am not the person you're expecting." A murmur rippled through the room. People exchanged glances, some confused, others annoyed. A young woman with glasses pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, then looked up in shock. He's telling the truth. This is Sundar Pichai. The silver-haired man's smile vanished. He adjusted his glasses and peered more closely at Sundar. Well, this is unexpected, he said finally. Where is Ajay Gupta then? As if on cue, the doors burst open and a flustered man in his 40s rushed in. I am so sorry for the delay. My driver took me to the wrong hotel. The newcomer stopped abruptly when he saw Sundar sitting in his place. Mr. Pichai? Ajay Gupta looked as confused as everyone else. What are you doing here? Before Sundar could answer, phones around the table began buzzing with notifications. Several people gasped as they checked their screens. Sir, the woman with glasses said, turning her phone toward the silver-haired man. You might want to see this. On the screen was a social media post showing Sundar in the restaurant earlier, surrounded by the PR students with their cameras. The caption read, Google CEO kicked out of Grand Palace Hotel. The post already had thousands of shares. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment. This day was spiraling out of control, and it wasn't even 10 a.m. yet. When he opened them again, every person in the room was staring at him, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed amusement, and a few already typing on their phones, undoubtedly spreading the story further. I think, Sundar said with remarkable calm, I should probably step out and let you continue your meeting with Mr. Gupta. As he stood to leave, he knew that outside these doors, a much bigger problem awaited him. Sundar stepped out of the boardroom, pulling out his phone to call his PR team. 3 missed calls from his assistant and a text that read, Urgent, call me ASAP, story going viral. Before he could dial, a hotel security guard approached him with 2 other uniformed staff members. Excuse me, sir, the guard said firmly. I need to speak with you. Sundar nodded, slipping his phone back into his pocket. Of course. There seems to be some confusion about who you are, the guard continued. His name tag Rodriguez. Could you please come with us to the security office to clear things up? Is that really necessary? Sundar asked. I've already explained several times this morning that I'm Sundar Pichai. Rodriguez exchanged glances with his colleagues. Sir, we have reports of someone impersonating a tech CEO to gain access to private meetings. We need to verify your identity. Sundar took a deep breath. My ID is in my room safe. We can go there first if you'd like. We'll need to escort you, Rodriguez insisted. As they walked through the hotel lobby, Sundar became uncomfortably aware of people staring. Some were openly taking photos or videos with their phones. The morning's confusion had created a spectacle, and he was at the center of it. Is this really necessary? Sundar asked quietly, noticing the growing crowd. Hotel protocol, sir, Rodriguez replied, not lowering his voice at all. They reached the elevators, where a small group of guests waited. When the doors opened, Rodriguez held up his hand to stop them from entering. Security matter. Please take the next elevator, he announced loudly. A woman in the waiting group recognized Sundar. Hey, isn't that the Google guy? What's happening? Someone else replied, I heard he tried to crash some private investment meeting. The rumors were already mutating. Sundar felt his face grow warm as more phones came out to capture the moment. Inside the elevator, Sundar tried once more. This situation is becoming embarrassing. I am who I say I am. Rodriguez remained professional but unmoved. Just following procedures, sir. When they reached Sundar's floor, a small crowd had already gathered near the elevators. Hotel guests who had heard something was happening. The 3 security guards formed a tight triangle around Sundar, making the scene look even more serious than it was. As they approached his room, Sundar spotted a news crew setting up in the hallway. Somehow, local media had already caught wind of the story. Mr. Pichai, can you comment on why you're being escorted by security? A reporter called out, thrusting a microphone in his direction. Rodriguez stepped between them. No comments at this time. This only made it look worse, as if Sundar was being detained rather than escorted. Inside his room, Sundar retrieved his passport and ID from the safe. Here, he said, handing them to Rodriguez. This should clear everything up. Rodriguez examined the documents carefully, then radioed his colleagues. Identity confirmed. It is him. The security guard's face showed the first hint of embarrassment. Mr. Pichai, I apologize for the inconvenience. There's been a misunderstanding. Several misunderstandings. Sundar corrected him, his patience wearing thin. When they opened the door to leave, the hallway had filled with even more people, hotel guests, staff, and now multiple reporters. Camera flashes went off immediately. Mr. Pichai, is it true you were trying to access confidential information? Were you asked to leave the hotel? Has Google responded to your detention? The questions came rapid fire, each more ridiculous than the last. Rodriguez tried to clear a path, but the damage was done. What should have been a simple ID verification had turned into a very public spectacle. As Sundar walked through the crowd, trying to maintain his dignity, he spotted a familiar face, Richard, the events manager from breakfast, watching the scene with horror as he realized just how badly the hotel had mishandled their famous guest. Outside in the hallway, the hashtag Pichagate was already trending. Sundar finally made it back to his room after navigating through the crowd. He locked the door behind him and leaned against it, taking a deep breath. His phone vibrated continuously in his pocket like an angry bee. When he checked it, his heart sank. 57 new text messages, 39 missed calls, and hundreds of email notifications. But most alarming was the Twitter, now X, notification showing hashtag Pichagate trending at number 3 worldwide. This can't be happening, he muttered, opening the app to see what people were saying. The first video he saw had already been viewed 2 million times. It showed him being escorted by security guards, completely stripped of context. The caption read, "Breaking, Google CEO kicked out of Grand Palace Hotel after trying to crash private meeting. Hashtag Pichagate." Another post, retweeted thousands of times, showed a blurry photo of him looking frustrated in the restaurant, with text claiming he had demanded special treatment and became enraged when not recognized. None of it was true. His PR director, Maya, was calling. He answered immediately. "Sundar, what on earth is happening?" she asked, her voice tense. "I got every news outlet from CNN to TMZ asking for comment." "It's all a misunderstanding," he explained, recounting the morning's events. "The hotel confused me with someone else, then things just spiraled out of control." "It's worse than you think," Maya replied. "Someone edited a clip to make it look like you were arguing with hotel staff. They'd added subtitles claiming you said, 'Don't you know who I am?' It's gone viral on TikTok." Sundar sat down heavily on the bed. "But I never said that." "I know, we're trying to get it taken down, but you know how these things spread." She paused. "Google's stock is already down 2%. A knock at the door interrupted them. "I have to go," Sundar told Maya. "Keep me updated." Through the peephole, he saw a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, looking anxious. Cautiously, Sundar opened the door. "Mr. Pichai, I'm James Worthington, the general manager of the Grand Palace Hotel. May I please come in?" Sundar stepped aside to let him enter. James's face was pale, his forehead beaded with sweat. "Mr. Pichai, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry we are for this catastrophic series of misunderstandings," James began, his hands fidgeting with his tie. "This is the worst PR disaster in our hotel's history." "It's not great for me either," Sundar replied dryly. James nodded vigorously. "We fired the security team that caused the scene in the hallway, and we're preparing a public statement taking full responsibility." Sundar's phone buzzed again. A text from his assistant. "Your wife saw the news. She's worried." "That won't be necessary," Sundar told James, surprising himself with his calm tone. "Firing people will only make this story bigger." "But sir, our reputation is important, yes, so is mine, but making this a bigger spectacle won't help either of us." James looked confused. This wasn't the angry reaction he had expected. Sundar's phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line made him groan. Request for comment. Google CEO's hotel meltdown, Forbes. "Look," Sundar said to James. "What we need isn't more drama. We need to correct the narrative." As if to underscore his point, the hashtag Google Karen CEO began trending, with memes comparing Sundar to infamous Karen viral videos. Outside the window, Sundar spotted two news vans pulling up to the hotel entrance. On his laptop, an alert showed that a parody video titled "When Google's CEO Gets No Respect" had hit 1 million views in just 40 minutes. The digital wildfire was spreading faster than anyone could control it. What had started as a simple case of mistaken identity had morphed into a full-blown internet scandal, with each retelling becoming more exaggerated than the last. James's phone rang. His face fell as he listened to the caller. "Sir," he said after hanging up, "I'm afraid CNN is now reporting that you were escorted from the premises by police." He looked up helplessly, but there were no police. Sundar nodded grimly. "Welcome to the internet age, Mr. Worthington. Truth is just a suggestion." The situation called for damage control. James Worthington paced the room, making frantic calls to the hotel's PR team, while Sundar sat calmly at the desk, his fingers moving quickly across his laptop keyboard. "Our social media team can issue an apology," James suggested, covering the phone's microphone. "We'll offer a full explanation of the misunderstanding." Sundar shook his head. "That will only keep the story alive. I have a different approach." A soft knock interrupted them. James opened the door to find Richard, the events manager, standing there with a tall, elegant woman. "Mr. Pichai," Richard said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is Madame Rousseau, the owner of the Grand Palace hotel chain. She flew in from Paris when she heard what happened." The woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "Monsieur Pichai, I cannot express my horror at what has transpired this morning. The Grand Palace has hosted presidents and royalty without incident for decades, yet we have failed you so completely." Sundar shook her hand. "Madame Rousseau, please don't be too hard on your staff. In today's world of instant news and social media, misunderstandings can spiral quickly." Madame Rousseau looked surprised by his calm demeanor. "You are very gracious, monsieur. Most people in your position would be threatening lawsuits by now." "Lawsuits won't fix what's happening online," Sundar replied, turning his laptop to show them the screen. "But this might help." On the screen was a draft tweet from his official account. "Had an interesting morning at the Grand Palace Hotel. A case of mistaken identity led to some confusion. Reminder that even tech CEOs can be unrecognized sometimes. Thanks to the staff for sorting it out with good humor. Hashtag not a big deal." James and Madame Rousseau exchanged glances. "You're making light of it?" James asked, bewildered. "I'm humanizing it," Sundar corrected him. "People love outrage, but they also love seeing powerful people take things in stride. If I act offended or angry, this story lives for weeks. If I laugh it off, it might die by tomorrow." Madame Rousseau nodded slowly. "It's clever. But what about the false stories already circulating?" "My team is handling those. We're reaching out to reporters who have the most egregious misinformation. The rest will correct itself once boring truth replaces exciting fiction." Sundar's phone rang. It was Maya from PR. "Good news," she said when he answered. "We got the original, unedited security footage from the hotel. It clearly shows you being polite throughout the whole incident. Several major outlets have agreed to run corrections." "Perfect," Sundar replied. "Send it to me, and prepare to release my tweet in exactly 15 minutes. After hanging up, he turned to the hotel executives. "The Grand Palace should issue a simple, factual statement about an hour after my tweet. Confirm there was a case of mistaken identity, apologize briefly, and move on. Don't over-explain or it will seem defensive." Madame Rousseau looked impressed. "You've handled communications crisis before, I see." Sundar smiled. "When you run a company with billions of users, misunderstandings are inevitable. The key is not to let them define you." A hotel assistant arrived with a tray of coffee and pastries. As they all sat down to discuss the finer points of their coordinated response, the atmosphere in the room shifted from panic to focused resolution. "One more thing," Sundar said, accepting a cup of coffee. "I'd like to meet with all the staff involved in today's events before I leave." James looked nervous. "To reprimand them?" "No," Sundar replied. "To thank them for a valuable reminder that even in our digital world, face-to-face communication remains essential, and perhaps to take a selfie or two, so they'll remember what I look like next time." For the first time that day, Genuine laughter filled the room. Outside, the media circus continued, unaware that its star attraction was already dismantling the big top, one strategic tweet at a time. The grand ballroom of the Grand Palace Hotel had been quickly transformed. Where there had been chaos just hours earlier, there was now order. Hotel staff stood nervously in a semicircle, many looking at their feet, others stealing glances at the tech CEO who had become the center of an internet storm. Sundar Pichai stood at the front of the room, remarkably relaxed for someone whose name was still trending worldwide. His tweet had gone viral for all the right reasons, with over 200,000 retweets in just 2 hours. The narrative was already shifting. "I want to thank you all for coming," Sundar began, his voice warm and genuine. "Some of you may be worried about your jobs. Let me be clear. I have not asked for anyone to be fired or disciplined." A visible wave of relief passed through the room. A young waiter in the back actually sighed out loud. "Mistakes happen," Sundar continued. "I've made plenty myself. What matters is how we respond to them." He walked slowly around the room, making eye contact with different staff members. "I could have gotten angry this morning. I could have made demands or threats. Many people would have. But what would that accomplish?" Richard, the events manager who had first confused Sundar at breakfast, raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, if I may ask, why aren't you angry? This incident has caused you significant trouble." Sundar smiled. "When I was growing up in India, my family didn't have much. No refrigerator, no television for many years. I shared a room with my brother, sleeping on the living room floor. Fame and recognition are new to me, relatively speaking." He paused, looking around the room. "Being mistaken for someone else reminded me of something important. At our core, we're all just people trying to do our best. Your jobs are to ensure the safety and satisfaction of your guests. You were doing that, even if there was confusion about who I was." Melissa, the events coordinator who had led him into the wrong meeting, wiped away a tear. "Thank you for understanding, Mr. Pichai." Sundar nodded. "Now, I have a proposal. The internet loves conflict and drama. Let's give them something different." He explained his idea, and within minutes, the ballroom was rearranged. Hotel staff gathered around Sundar as a photographer from the hotel's marketing team prepared to take a group photo. "Everyone smile," the photographer called out. "And Mr. Rodriguez, maybe don't look quite so serious this time." The security guard who had escorted Sundar through the lobby laughed and relaxed his stern expression. The camera flashed several times. 10 minutes later, Sundar posted the group photo on his social media accounts with the caption, "The wonderful team at Grand Palace Hotel. Thanks for teaching me the value of patience, good humor, and clear communication. Hashtag lessons learned." Madame Rousseau approached him as the staff began to disperse. "Monsieur Pichai, once again, you have my deepest apologies. We would like to offer you a lifetime of complimentary stays at any of our properties worldwide." Sundar shook his head. "That's very generous, but unnecessary. Instead, I'd like to suggest something else." He proposed that the hotel create a staff training program focused on cross-cultural communication and recognition in the digital age. He even offered to have Google develop a custom AI tool to help hotel staff quickly verify the identities of high-profile guests without creating embarrassing situations. "We could call it recognition without intrusion," he suggested. "Your hotel could pioneer it, and it might become an industry standard." Madame Rousseau was impressed. "You've turned a potential disaster into an opportunity for innovation. Remarkable." As Sundar left the ballroom, his phone buzzed with a notification. Google's stock had not only recovered from its earlier dip, but was now trading slightly higher than before the incident. Another notification showed that hashtag #PichaiClass was now trending, with people sharing stories of how they had handled embarrassing situations with grace. What had begun as humiliation was transforming into a masterclass in crisis management and human understanding. 2 weeks after the Grand Palace Hotel incident, Sundar Pichai stood on stage at the annual Google I/O conference. Thousands of developers, tech enthusiasts, and journalists filled the auditorium, with millions more watching the live stream worldwide. The usual excitement about new products and features hung in the air, but there was something else too, a buzz of curiosity. Everyone had heard about what the media now called the hotel mix-up, and many wondered if Google's CEO would mention it. After introducing several new AI features and hardware updates, Sundar paused. The giant screen behind him went blank. Before we continue with our product announcements, I'd like to share something personal, he said. The audience grew quiet. Many of you probably saw the news about my experience at the Grand Palace Hotel, Sundar began, a slight smile on his face. What was supposed to be a routine business trip turned into something quite different. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. At first glance, it was just a funny story, a CEO not being recognized. But as I reflected on it, I realized there was something deeper worth sharing. Images appeared on the screen behind him, screenshots of the viral posts, news headlines, and finally, the group photo with the hotel staff. In today's world, we're constantly building technologies to recognize things. Facial recognition, voice recognition, pattern recognition. He gestured to the new AI features he had just presented. We're making machines that can identify people instantly, remember everything about them, and never make mistakes. He walked slowly across the stage. But that morning at the hotel reminded me of something important. Being human means sometimes not being recognized. It means making mistakes, creating confusion, and then finding ways to resolve it together. The audience was completely silent now, captivated. When the hotel staff didn't recognize me, my first reaction was surprise, then frustration. This isn't supposed to happen to a CEO, right? He smiled. But then I asked myself, why not? Why should I expect everyone to know who I am? Sundar shared how the experience had made him rethink Google's approach to certain products. He announced a new initiative called Human-Centered Recognition, a set of guidelines ensuring that all Google products with recognition capabilities would prioritize privacy, dignity, and the right to occasionally be anonymous. Technology should recognize us when we want to be recognized and respect our privacy when we don't, he explained. And when it makes mistakes, as all systems sometimes will, it should fail gracefully, with humility. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Sundar then invited a surprise guest to the stage, Madame Rousseau from the Grand Palace Hotel. She walked out, elegant and poised, to join him. Madame Rousseau and I are pleased to announce a partnership between Google and the Grand Palace Hotel Group. Together, we're developing hospitality training programs that blend technology with human wisdom. Madame Rousseau stepped to the microphone. What began as our greatest embarrassment has become our greatest opportunity. Sundar Pichai showed us that how you respond to a mistake matters more than the mistake itself. As the presentation concluded, Sundar shared one final thought with the audience. We often talk about artificial intelligence, but that day reminded me of the value of authentic humanity. In a world rushing to automate recognition, sometimes the most powerful moment is being seen, truly seen, by another person, not because of your title or status, but simply because you're there, a fellow human being worthy of attention and respect. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 2 minutes. As Sundar looked out at the crowd, he knew that what could have remained a simple embarrassing incident had transformed into something much more valuable, a lesson in humility, grace, and the complex dance between technology and humanity. What had begun as humiliation in a luxury hotel had ended as inspiration for millions. And that, Sundar thought as he waved to the crowd, was worth far more than perfect recognition could ever be.